Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ask an Expert. We are diving into a topic that I would consider it the hottest topic for our audience, and one that I guess I consider it that because I know you all care about it and we care about it. And when we look at stats for what you guys are reading on Ride IQ's website and listening to, this is a topic that definitely resonates with many of you. So without further ado, I'll tell you what the topic is. We're talking about how to balance life and work and riding as an adult amateur. And we have an incredible guest to talk to us about this today. We're talking to Heather Richards, who rides to this pre-St. George level in dressage. So is an upper level dressage rider. She's also one of Lauren Spreiser's students, which I knew. What I did not know is that they're also close friends. So Heather, I know Heather was at Lauren's wedding. I think she might have even been in Lauren's wedding. And we're all super fans of Lauren. So I'm already a fan of yours, Heather. But with that long hello, I should first thank you for taking the time, especially with everything you have going on, to talk to us tonight.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here. I'm always happy to talk to other horse people because I work from home, and basically my social life consists of people I work with, talking to them on the phone or on video because most of them aren't right here, and going to riding lessons and talking to Lauren, and that's about it because that's all I have time for.
Totally.
My husband might make a cameo at one point when he pokes his head in. He's out taking care of the horses tonight.
Oh, that's amazing. Are the horses on your property?
Yeah, they are. I keep my horses here at home. It's this was never my dream. I was not one of those people who I want to see my ponies in my front yard. And we've been here for 13 years, and it's pretty hard to imagine doing it any other way now.
Wow, that's amazing. So let's consider that where you are today, and then rewind and start by talking about your journey as a horse person. So you never imagined having horses on your property. When did you start riding, and what did you imagine as you were kind of evolving as a horse person?
I wanted to be an eventer when I was a kid. That's what I wanted to do, was eventing. And I never got the opportunity to do that. I started out actually riding hunter jumpers in northern New Jersey, riding lesson horses, catch riding. I didn't have my own horse most of the time when I was a kid. So I rode pretty much anything that came through the barn, which means I rode a lot of sketchy creatures. But I got a lot of experience and got to do a lot of different things. I didn't ride for a few years in college and got back into it after college. Again, catch riding, and got my first horse as an adult right out of graduate school. It was a gift horse that really ended up being my first dressage horse. He had been a jumper. He had been an eventer. But I got more interested in dressage and had a couple of injuries that made jumping a little bit painful. So I got into dressage, and that really started my journey. I met Lauren. I was riding, God, what did I have at the time? I had this horrible, really dreadful 5-year-old who was very mean to me. And then I had a half Arabian who Lauren dutifully taught me lessons on. And I finally said to her, I want to find a horse that I can go to second level with. That was my big goal, is I wanted to ride second level. And she helped me find the most wonderful Welsh Cob cross. He was a former combined driving horse. She helped me get him all the way to pre-St. George. He was really, really special.
I have full body chills. That's how, I love a Welsh, and a Welsh Cob sounds amazing. But getting a Welsh Cob that was a former driving horse to pre-St. George is something very, very special. And Lauren, I think, has a gift for finding these horses or seeing their potential or something. We met one of her working students' horses when we visited her in Florida, and I believe that horse was a former driving horse as well that Lauren found on Facebook. Shout out to Skylar, who's wonderful and helps us with a lot of Ride IQ stuff. So first of all, your early riding sounds very scrappy, and that there's so much like I have so much admiration for people who make it work when it's like whatever horse people are like willing to let you ride is the horse that you're riding. And your first horse was post grad school that you owned yourself. That is a very cool story. It sounds like as you went, you kind of just set your sights a little bit higher and higher. And having Lauren's instruction, of course, helps with that because Lauren is a wonderful coach.
She's a wonderful coach. I think it's also just the consistency of sticking with something and someone and doing it regularly. I when I was a kid, it was very much my dad was like, you have to have a goal. What's your goal? We're going to teach, if you're going to pay for riding lessons, what do you want to do? And I was just raised that way. And so for me, it doesn't have to be the big, I learned early on, it doesn't have to be the massive goal of, I want to ride the Grand Prix or I want to go to the Olympics. It's what's the next goal? And that's really what keeps me going. It's what makes me go out to the barn when I'm like super tired. And the last thing I want to do is get on two horses. That was yesterday. It's just, you got to figure out what you want to do next and figure out how you get there. But the consistency, I mean, I see too many people not taking consistent lessons, not being good students. And I don't mean being good students in that like they do everything their trainer says, but really learning. Like you have to listen to what people are saying and really take that in. And when it's hard to hear, you have to take that and figure out what to do with it. Lauren and I click. I'm the kind of rider, I like someone who teaches me how to train my horse. I don't just want a riding lesson because that's all the horses I've had, I've kind of made myself. So I don't need just the riding lesson. I need someone who teaches me how to train so that I know what I'm doing and what I'm looking for when I'm riding on my own. And that works for me, but that doesn't work for everybody. So some of it is also finding someone that works for you and a style that works for you.
Totally. And yeah, understanding yourself and what you need and what your next goal is. How you're talking about consistency of both riding and lessons. Typically, how often are you having an in-person lesson and how often are you riding?
So I used to have two horses. I sold the second one, I don't know, 2 years ago, year and a half ago. It was going to be it. I was going to focus on Hallie, my upper level horse that was going to go somewhere. And Lauren's an enabler and she convinced me to buy a 3-year-old this year. So I ride because I've got the two of them. I usually try to ride 6 days a week. If I can, the upper level horse gets ridden 5 days a week usually. And the baby, I sit on him 3 days a week and poke around. But yeah, I try to ride as much as I can. It's a lot of planning. Like I look at the weather obsessively and I kind of plan out like, okay, this is where I have to be this week for work. And this is what time I have. And so there's a lot of juggling. Today worked out really well. It's raining tonight, so I wasn't going to ride anyway.
We nailed it.
Perfect.
We would have moved this according to the weather if we had to. Because we've been excited to chat with you. I'll ask one final kind of like get to know Heather question, and then I will yield some of my time to Kinsey because I know she has questions too. But will you tell us a bit about your career and mostly like what does your day-to-day job look like these days so we can understand kind of what the balancing act is? We know it's between dressage training and competing, and then what's the other side of that?
So, those memes that went around like Facebook and Instagram they're still around, but maybe a year or two ago, it was like what people think I do, what my mom thinks I do. And then like you get down to like what I actually do. I save land. That's the fun way of saying it is I'm in land conservation. I've worked for nonprofits my whole career. I've been doing land conservation work in Virginia for more than 20 years now. So that's really my day to day. It used to be a lot of working with private landowners to help families figure out what to do with the family farm and how to make sure that it doesn't turn into houses. But what I do now, I work for the Conservation Fund. I'm the MidAtlantic Regional Director for the fund. And we do a lot of buying land for parks, for new state forests to add to the National Park Service. I work a lot with the U.S. Forest Service on the George Washington Jefferson National Forest. So it sounds really exciting. Like people are like, you must be out in the field all the time doing awesome, exciting things. And really, it's either you're out in the field traipsing through briars and getting stuck and wondering if you're going to get bit by a snake, which is basically how I spent yesterday. Or I'm sitting in my office asking people, where's that thing you owe me, whether it's title work or a grant report or something like that. So that's really my day to day. I have a pretty good mix of travel around Virginia. So some of it's, 1 or 2 days away from home at a time, or sitting at my desk in my office. And it's, these days it's in the fall. It's honestly in spring and the fall, it's tough because I'm traveling for work 3 or 4 days a week and I'm only in my office 1 day a week. And that makes fitting riding in a little bit more challenging, especially since that's when you actually want to be riding.
So would you say that your job, like when you are at home, are you working like normal business hours mostly and then you go and ride after work, or how does that work?
I work mostly normal business hours. I have lobbied state senators while on the back of a horse. I am capable of talking to grant to foundations while putting polo wraps on. I have had people call me out while I'm on work calls being like, Heather, are you at the barn? I can hear horses in the background. But yeah, I mostly work normal hours. I have the ability to flex my schedule around, which is helpful in the summer. Virginia is pretty hot. And so I try to ride in the mornings instead of after work. I've got lights on my arena, so I ride in the dark a lot in the cold. But yeah, I work mostly normal hours. Sometimes when it's really nice or in the winter, I will actually go out and ride at lunch, which is one of the nice things about having the horses at home is that I can do that. It's harder to do that when you're boarding.
Totally. Um, that's hilarious that people have mentioned they hear the horses on the work calls. And your job sounds fascinating. And I mean, I know that you said sometimes it's like tracking things down and whatnot. I guess it sounds like really important work, and therefore like it would be more fulfilling. So hopefully that's the case. I'm curious to learn about a little more about the two horses that you currently have. You mentioned Hallie and then the 3-year-old. Will you tell us about those two?
Yeah, Hallie is an 11-year-old Dutch Warmblood. She's by Sir Sinclair. I've had her for 6 years as of yesterday. She walked into my barn 6 years ago yesterday. And I mentioned Cardoon before. He was my Welsh Cob Cross. Lauren and I spent 6 months looking for the horse that became Cardoon. Like I swear to God, we looked at so many things that were not suitable. And she called me one day and she's like, Heather, I sat on the horse that you're going to buy. This is great. I was out of town. I was like halfway across the country or something. When it was time for me to look for something to replace Cardoon, I was stealing myself for the same kind of like dreadful search. I had more money to spend this time, but still. And she was the first and only horse that I sat on in that search. She was 5 years old and really just a kind horse with good movement and a good brain. And, I keep my horses at home. So I really have to think about how safe am I going to feel? Like, I don't need something dead, but I also need something that's not going to try to kill me on a daily basis. And I need something that's got a little bit of life skills. My husband has to handle the horses when I travel for work. I've got a farm sitter, and that's something I have to consider is that like other people that are not full-time horse professionals have to handle my horses. So Hallie fit the bill, and she's been tremendous. We are a hair's breadth away from pre-St. George. We finally figured out how to do pirouettes like last week, which is pretty exciting. But now we've completely lost the ability to do tempi changes because dressage. But she's terrific. And I love riding her. She really is. She's a great horse. The 3-year-old is a Frisian cross that I bought and had shipped while I was away in Barcelona this year, and decided that, buying a 3-year-old off a video sounded like a good idea. It was with a trainer that Lauren teaches clinics at her farm in Arkansas, and he's a Frisian cross. I've been told he's Frisian standard bred Morgan, so that's a fascinating cross. But he has, man, I got off him last night, and I said to my husband, because when I ride the babies, I make my husband sit by the riding arena in case something goes horribly wrong. And Toto is exactly as advertised. He is kind and doesn't have a mean bone in his body. He's hardly done anything wrong since he's been here for a few months. And he has the most balanced canter of almost any horse I've ever sat on, much less a 3-year-old. He's really like, his canter is really cool. So that's from the video. That's why I bought him. I'm like, I want to ride that. That looks like fun. So anyway, his name's Toto. I'm going to show him under the name Brackley. And if anybody is a Formula One fan out there, I am a Mercedes. I'm a Mercedes gal. So you could connect the dots on that one. He has team colors, brow band with the Petronas green. So just a little nugget for my Formula One fans out there.
I love that. That community is growing. Man, the Formula One ever since Drive to Survive is like, it's the cool thing in the US now. So
it is. I've been a fan for longer. I believe
you.
Yeah, my other dangerous and expensive hobby is car racing, which my husband got me into. So that's a whole other story.
That's amazing. Isn't it like Liz Halliday Sharp or something? She was like a car racer before she was a 5-star event rider.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
A professional.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, so you mentioned like when you're buying your horse, you're having to take into account the fact that you're not always home when there's other people that are handling them. What are some other considerations that you took into account when you bought a new horse? Like what kind of criteria were you looking for yourself as an adult amateur?
I developed my horses myself. Like I don't have all of my horses end up spending some time at Lauren's. Like Hallie has spent a month here and there in full training at Lauren's, but I'm looking for a good brain. I want something that I'm going to have fun riding, and I need something that I'm not going to be scared of. And so that's important to me. And I think everybody has a different level of what they're willing to do and how much support they need. I have to say, as I've gotten older, I have less tolerance for the crazy stuff. I've had enough injuries in my life. I don't need to look for more. But I look for the same thing everybody else does. I look for good movement. I look for a good walk and a good canter. I will say Toto's trot is very ordinary, and that's fine. His canter is exceptional, and you can fix the trot. But really, I look for a good brain. I look for a horse that when you ask it a question and it doesn't have an answer to, that it tries to do something that isn't just giving you the middle finger. You want a horse that's going to try to answer your questions and not just tell you where to go and shove it.
I really like that thought process because we hear often from professionals who are horse shopping with their students that their eyes light up when they see the horse that is, flashy and beautiful, but like totally not the horse that's going to make them happy, and not the horse that is like correct for what their goals are or, where they're currently at. And it sounds like you take a really like thoughtful approach that is actually suitable for you and even like the people around you, the other people who will be in the horse's life, which is probably a skill you've developed. Because all of our eyes light up.
Yeah. And, it's also a function of like, I'm a really normal person, guys. I've worked for nonprofits my whole career. My husband is not independently wealthy either. He's a professional firefighter. So like,
oh, cool.
we're not rich. And so I have to look at what I can afford to buy. And that has been, gosh, I've had Arabian crosses. I've had my Welsh Cob cross, who was like the bargain basement best buy ever, because he was just amazing. I have Toto, who's what we're jokingly calling an Amish warmblood because he was bred by the Amish. You buy what you can afford. And if you can't afford the super flashy, like there's a whole lot you can do with other breeds. People get all into, the judges, the judge doesn't like my Arabian. Well, if you train it properly, the judge is going to like your Arabian just fine. And you can learn an awful lot and then trade up from that. Like, I think too many people try to start off with the big fancy warmblood when what they really need is a thoroughbred or, the half Arabian. Like the first half Arabian I had was half Arabian and the other half was quarter horse Belgian. And he looked like a German riding pony. He was adorable. Incredibly ordinary movement, but also great to train. And, and I've also worked my way up on horses by buying relatively inexpensive projects and then selling them, putting a year or two into them and selling them. And, I'm lucky that I can do that. Not everybody can. But it's, you got to remember, people just need to remember you have to ride the horse every day. And we spend a lot of money doing this. And if you're not having fun doing it, then what are you doing it for?
Totally. And I think you are, well, one, a wonderful example of you have proven to be an exceptional student, because it's one thing to like sit on the pre St. George horse and learn how to do pre St. George from the horse that you bought. It was, either. What a great opportunity, but it's different than, putting in the time day after day and getting better yourself as a rider and your horse getting better because of how you're training it. In addition to your in-person lessons, are there any like resources that you are seeking out to help you become a more knowledgeable and capable horse person? Or is it really like just being present every moment that you're in the saddle? How do you kind of think about the fact that you've been able to progress more than a lot of people can given those same circumstances?
Yeah, one of the best things that I've been able to do, especially as I've brought horses up through the levels, like anybody who's gone from training level to pre St. George knows that it is the most humbling, grueling, miserable process sometimes. And oh my God, the babies are the worst. Like you go through like weeks at a time where you're like, why am I doing this? This is horrible. Like even my first whole year with Hallie, even though she was a charming, delightful, wonderful creature, I had to gird myself to get on her every day. Not because she was going to try to kill me, but because it was just like, ugh, this is so unpleasant. And like we'd go through like 10 minutes of the mare telling me where to go, and I don't want to go forward. And it's like, but you're 5 and you have to. So one of the best things and experiences that I've had is because I've been with Lauren for so long and I spend enough time in her barn, and I can't recommend this to other people enough. Get to know your trainer. And number one, Lauren is good at teaching me because she's done what I'm doing. So you need to find a trainer who has done what you want to do. And if that's training your horse, then you need a trainer that's trained their horses to that level. But I've watched her go through that process with a lot of young horses. And so like we have a club, the Young Horse Club, we've got jackets and we joke about it because everybody goes through that. And when you see someone who's an incredibly good rider and multiple people going through that, and you start to talk to them about what that process is like, and it's like, yeah, it sucks sometimes. Like we all just want to go to the show and be beautiful and prance around on our fancy horses, but so much of dressage is just really not pretty. It's just kind of getting through it. And so having been in that program, and not even in that program, but having just been around enough and watched enough to see what other people struggle through and know that what I'm going through is not abnormal and there is another side to it and I'll get there eventually, has been the best thing. And some of that is, I've gone, and when Hallie's been in training, I'll go and I'll watch Lauren ride other horses, or her working students like Skylar ride other horses. I've seen Skylar ride that lovely former driving horse. And I've seen her struggle at times, and I've seen what she's done with it. And it's incredible. I've gone down to visit in Wellington a couple of times, and that's also instructive to see what people are doing with their young horses and also with their CDI horses. So for me, it's been a lot of watching. It's how I learn, and talking to people. And really it's just the knowing that whatever I'm going through is not unusual. Like the fact 6 years ago, having lost my tempi changes just when I figured out how to do pirouettes would have sent me into a panic, especially since I'm going to a horse show in a week and a half. But now it's like, no, that's what happens. This is in fact normal. And, every once in a while, Lauren gets panic text messages from me, like she's got to talk me down off the cliff. But I do the same for her too sometimes. So that's just knowing that other people are out there and going through the same thing.
I think that's really, that's something that everyone can relate to. So I think that that's really helpful feedback or advice, I guess.
Yeah, just one more thing. I mean, it's hard. I mean, people, when you're out there and you're doing it, you're by yourself, like it's really hard, guys. Like I get it because I do this by myself all the time, and it's, you just got to know that you're not alone.
I have a follow-up question, because you mentioned how helpful it is to like know your trainer when that's an option. Do you have any specific advice for, like, clearly you and Lauren just clicked, and maybe that was serendipitous and wonderful, but was there anything that you like did to make yourself a good student, someone that Lauren might be interested in really helping extra or being around more?
I don't know. You'd have to ask her that. Um, I'm not sure. I think with any trainer that really wants to teach, they want to have students that will try whatever they're telling them to do. I I pick my trainers based on, like, I ask a lot of questions. I want to understand why you're telling me to do that thing. But I'll try to do it first, and then I'll say, okay, why was that supposed to work? Why did that work? That helps my process. And I've ridden with trainers, frankly, who do not like me to ask questions. So that was a big prerequisite for me. But I think the best way you can be a good student is when your trainer tells you to do something, do it. Like, do it wrong a million times, but do it wrong differently every time until you're willing to try. Because if we don't push ourselves out of our comfort zones, we're never going to get better. And I think that's what frustrates trainers with students sometimes, is that they're not willing to actually try the things that the trainers say. They're paying for advice. Like, may as well try it at least.
Absolutely. We just got a question in chat, and it's, how do you get the motivation to ride alone all the time?
It's not motivation. It's just commitment. It's just making the commitment to it. I've spent a lot of money on having a farm and taking riding lessons and buying nice horses. And, it doesn't, I joke with my husband, the nice thing about the race cars is that when the race car breaks or you don't want to drive it, you put it in the garage and it's going to be the same car when you take it back out again. But that's not the same with horses. So it really is just, it's not motivation. It's commitment.
That's a great answer. Sorry, I lost my mute button. It happens every time we do these. I want to circle back to the kind of intermediary goals that you set along the way to keep you going. Will you describe more about those goals, how often you're setting them, and how explicit you're being about what the goal is? Is there structure around this, or is it just built into your approach? And then give us some examples of goals that you would set to kind of keep yourself moving in the direction you intend to.
So like I said, when we went to buy Cardoon, I just wanted a horse I could do second level with. And that was the goal at the time. And then we got to second level. It's like, oh, wow, we could go further. Cardoon was a bit of a savant when it came to flying changes. So, like, we knew third level was not going to be a problem. Pirouettes were his Waterloo. His stifles weren't the greatest. So that's why we stopped at Pre-St. George with him. But, really it's kind of an annual goal setting that I do. And I'll take a look at where we are and readjust periodically. But, this time of year after regional championships, or, maybe a little bit later in the year, I'll sit down and be like, okay, what do I want to do next year? I like horse showing. Like, I don't horse show for the glory of it. Like, it's a social thing for me. Like I said before, I don't have any social life. So going and spending a couple days with my friends at the horse show is a good time. So I'm going to the regional championships this year, but not because I'm qualified in anything. And I had hoped to be qualified in something, but for reasons that I don't understand, I'm never quite at the point where getting qualified for something lines up with everything else. So we're going to go and ride 4-3 as a precursor to hopefully being able to do the Pre-St. George next year. But it's like, for me, it's a little bit like, what's the next step? And then breaking that down into what do we have to achieve to do that. With Hallie, getting her to be really round and on the bit has been, she's just getting the strengths to develop all of what she needs to do pirouettes. And to really do the bending that she needs and carrying that she needs at the upper levels has been a real process. And so I've focused a lot on strength with her, and building the strength to do the really collected work. The very collected canter has been hard, but we finally have kind of reached a little hump. And so every time we reach a little pinnacle, I look over the next side and say, okay, what's the next thing we have got to work on? So that's kind of how I break it down into, daily or weekly goals of what do we need to do this week, in terms of the riding. So it starts with the big goal. What do I want to be showing next year? And then, okay, what are the holes that we have right now that I need to work on? It's a little harder with the baby. With the 3-year-old, I want him to steer and stop and not buck me off. All of which he's delightful at. So, like,
those are important goals.
They are. Well, now it's like, we get on and we walk, trot, and canter for like 15 or 20 minutes and we call it a day. And I pat him on the head and tell him he's good and the best baby horse I've ever had.
That's a great outcome. I love that. So you mentioned enjoying showing, and one thing that like I think a lot of our members and just the community faces is a lot of times shows are not just a Saturday, Sunday activity. How have you made that work with your career of figuring out how to go to shows on the weekends and like weekdays, even on Fridays or whatever it ends up being? Do you have any advice on how to do that?
Laptops are great. Wi-Fi hotspots are great. I'm really lucky. I have a lot of vacation time, so I tend to use some of my vacation time to go to horse shows. But that said, it doesn't always work out that I can take that vacation time just because I've got stuff going on and I can work from most anywhere. So I do take my laptop. I have taken calls and negotiated real estate transactions at horse shows. Finding a quiet place is hard. that's sometimes a challenge. But again, I'm fortunate that especially the job that I have now is with an organization that has a good work-life balance, and they give us lots of flexibility to do things. I will say next week, so I'm showing next week on Friday and Saturday, and normally I would trailer down to the horse show, which is about 2 hours away, on Thursday. But I have an all-day meeting I have to be at that's an hour from the horse show grounds on Thursday. So I'm actually trailering in on Wednesday. I'll get my horse all set up. I'll hand walk her in the morning, go to the meeting I have to go to all day, then go back to the horse show, ride her that night, and then show Friday and Saturday. So that's what next week looks like.
It's a lot of just being proactive and thinking ahead. Like even when you mentioned looking at the weather obsessively and making sure that these pieces all fit together, that is a skill that clearly you've integrated into your life. I want to talk more about the lifestyle that you're in now, which is having your two horses at home at your farm and competing at a high level. If I decided to walk into that life now, like buy a farm, have my horses at home, I don't think I have the know-how from a training perspective to also be successful. So what level were you at when you shifted to having your horses at home and riding alone most of the time? And what's your sense in terms of like coach involvement that will make an adult amateur successful level dependent? You know what I mean? Like as a lower level rider, training level dressage rider, what might that look like?
I was riding training level when I brought my horses home. I had that really mean baby horse that I had, and I had my old thoroughbred. I actually have a third horse at home. I have my little Welsh pony who his sole job is to be nice to my friends' children. Honestly, it was a lot of, it's taken me a long time. We've been here 13 years, and that's how long it's taken me to get to this level. I, for a very long time, was taking lessons once a week, maybe a little bit more. I'm sorry, my dog is
Your dog looks like Toto too.
Her name is Scruffy. We just inherited her from a friend who passed away. So she's.
Oh, I love her.
Yeah, she's cute. Anyway, you have to be, when you're riding at home alone, you have to be committed to going and getting feedback on a regular basis. It really, like, I went for lessons a lot when we first moved in, and when I've had various horses. I try to go once a week. That doesn't always work out. Used to be a little bit easier. My job took a little bit less time before. But one of the things that's been great is I use my Pivo to film myself, and I then watch the videos screaming at myself to put my elbows in or pick my hands up or more leg, or why are you going so slow, or why did you do it? Like I verbally scream at myself watching myself, but it's really helpful. And so if you are at home riding by yourself, you have to take what your coach said, then watch yourself ride, and you can take that feedback and really do a lot with it.
What do you do when you feel like stuck? When you mentioned like right now you like lost the tempies, or if you're just having a week or a couple of weeks where you're just like feeling like you're not making progress because you aren't riding a schoolmaster, what are kind of some of your methods for getting through that?
Sometimes it's changing the question. A lot of times it's going and having a lesson. Sometimes it's calling Lauren and saying, I need you to sit on my horse and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Inevitably, I take Hallie to Lauren's. Lauren gets on Hallie and is like, I have no idea what you're talking about. She feels great. So that also could be helpful. So and sometimes like discretion is the better part of valor. Go for a trail ride, go for a walk. Don't ride that day. Like I've had days where it's like, damn it, this is my day to ride. It's nice out. I have the time, but I'm exhausted or I'm really angry from something that happened at work. And knowing that that's not a good day to get on my horse is, because maybe we haven't been progressing and I'm frustrated in the riding and now I'm frustrated with work. Like, don't get on your horse. Go have a beer or something. Like go do something else. Knowing that has been really helpful. I've learned a lot having to do this myself and really sit down and think about like what's going wrong and what do I need to change. So a lot of times it's really just changing something, but it's hard to know that. And like I say this now and it sounds like, oh, that's, you're very enlightened, but I'm not. I've made plenty of mistakes. Like I said, I'm a very normal person. I'm a very normal rider who's just put in a lot of time and made a lot of mistakes. And, you just do it wrong, different every time. And eventually you hit on the thing that'll work.
I don't think I could watch you ride Prix St. George and think you're a normal rider, but I understand the sentiment of what you're saying. Also, we got Lauren is watching or tuned in, and you said maybe Lauren could tell us why it has been a great match between you two. She said that you are an excellent therapist and sometimes your husband brings her snacks.
Yes. My husband also will sometimes come to horse shows and cook for everybody. There's not that many people going to regionals next week, but we're bringing the Airstream. We're going to cook for whoever's there. He makes great breakfast sandwiches. He's a good horse husband. I should say, like I couldn't do this without him and without his kind of agreement to live this life. There are other reasons other than having the horses that we have a farm. We won't talk about the multiple garages that we have on the property and how many cars live here as well. But he's incredibly helpful. Like I said, he's taking care of the horses tonight. He mucks stalls. He's a firefighter paramedic, so he's really good at giving IV injections and doing medical stuff if I'm not here. And that's part of what makes it possible is, him being here. I'll say, one of the other things, and people are like, I know people don't want to bring their horses home because they think they'll never ride again. And that certainly happens with lots of people. My farm is not perfect. You are not going to come here and see like wonderful landscaping but it's safe and we mow the grass and the facilities for the horses are good. And I'm meticulous about grooming my riding arena. But it's, we focus on progress and not perfection. And if anybody rides Peloton bikes, you'll have heard that from Peloton. But it's a good mantra, progress, not perfection. Like just keep moving forward, keep plugging away at it. And eventually you'll see the rewards for doing that.
Your husband sounds amazing. Kins, I didn't know if it was my turn or yours. Also, his breakfast sandwiches are getting some love in the chat as well. Yes, having a supportive spouse is a spouse or partner or anybody to kind of help with this dream, I think is an important part to whatever extent is possible. Like when we speak to Emma Klugman, who's a 5-star event rider and also in graduate school at George Washington University and becoming a lawyer, she talks a lot about her support system and especially how her mom helps make it work. So I think that is definitely something to consider as people pursue these goals. Did your husband have any involvement in horses prior to 13 years ago when you bought the farm? And does he enjoy being around the horses? How has that agreement kind of come to be?
He rode a little bit like as a little kid. He was born in England and he rode a little when he lived there, but he's not really. I mean, when he met me, I was mostly just out of college, and he was actually the one that helped me start riding again. He helped me find some catch rides when we first started dating, and as he was getting his paramedic certification, he worked at the Equine Medical Center in the surgery suite. So he's seen more colic surgeries than most people would ever want to see. So he's always been an animal person, which is great. We have dogs, obviously. And he was incredibly supportive when I was in graduate school of me getting the horse that Ian, who I ended up bringing to Virginia. We got married right before I went to graduate school, and he he likes the horses. He kind of sees them as big dogs. I swear he'd bring Toto in the house if he could. So he's always been helpful. We've been married 23 years now, and he's always been interested in the horses. Not really. I think he's ridden one or two of them, but not many. But you know, he likes animals and he's good with them, so that's helpful. I think everybody needs some sort of village, and it's, you know, it's partner or family support. It's friends that understand what you're talking about when you're talking about horses and riding. But I also have an incredibly good friend who I work with who races sled dogs competitively. And she and I talk a lot about the similarities between training dogs for competitive mushing and training horses, and the kind of parallels and getting to know animals that, you know, and that's something we share. So I think having a suite of people you can talk to about whatever's going on is really helpful.
I think that's such an important note to make. It's something that Jessa and I have experienced firsthand as we build Ride IQ. Is just, if at first it was like we would just lean on each other, and then as we started to build out our community of other startup founders, and it's like, oh my gosh, as soon as I know this person who's like building like the industrial space, it doesn't matter, but they're still on this, like doing this alongside us and like experiencing a lot of the same ups and downs. And that can really help you just like push through the next day and like see the light at the end of the tunnel. And like, it's fun to celebrate the other people around you who are having great experiences too. So I think that like the village, having a village is so important to all of this. Are there any sacrifices that you feel like you've made in order to make this possible, and kind of how did you think about making those decisions?
We don't travel nearly as much as we'd like to. You know, all of our money goes into the cars and the horses. So, you know, I could be doing a lot of other things with my time, and this is what we decided to do. I don't regret that at all. Every once in a while I do, but I'm sorry. My other dog has come to visit. Flynn, sits. You know, everything in life is about trade-offs, unless you're independently wealthy and can afford to hire people to do things for you. But it's really just a prioritization of, you know, what's important now. And really, I think I had a realization, I'm not gonna be able to do this forever. And I was actually car racing over Labor Day weekend, and a good friend of ours who's in her 80s now said to me, she said, you know, Heather, keep doing what you're doing, because, you know, there's a point will come when you can't do this anymore. And she was a really high level racing driver back in the 60s and 70s. She's really awesome. She's a badass woman. And she said, you just got to keep doing it. And so Kevin and I have both made that decision that like, we're going to keep doing the things that we love to do as much as we can, because you can't do this forever. There will come a time when I'm definitely not going to buy 3-year-olds off of videos forever. So like, do it now before you turn 50.
Yes, definitely. I need to hear more about the car racing. Is this a hobby? Do you and your husband both do it? Just tell us more about what's happening with the cars.
So he's been into little British cars for as long as I've known him. And about, maybe 15 years ago, he started getting into vintage car racing, largely as a mechanic. He had a car that he helped build for somebody, and they'd go all over the country to vintage races. And I started going, and photography is a kind of a side hobby of mine. And I learned how to do track photography, and I started getting media credentials. So I'd be at the track with them when I could afford to take the time off and not be at home and all that. And I said one day, I'm like, it'd be kind of fun to try it sometime. I'm like, I don't know if I'd like it, but like, it'd be fun to try. And so 2 years ago, he came home and he pushed a picture in front of me, and I'm like, yeah, that's Jim's car. I know that car, because Kevin stored it for this guy. And he says, it's not Jim's car, that's your car. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, Jim sold it to me. So yeah, 2 years ago, I went to race school, and I really wasn't sure I was going to like racing. And after the first weekend, I was hooked. I was like, when can we do it again? It was so much fun. So my car is a 1968 MG midget, little green midget. We call her Miriam, the midget. And Kevin races a 1960 MGA. Most of our friends race MGs and other, old British cars. So it's fun. We go, 3-4 times a year. But it's another great community. It's a lot like the horse community. It's a very tight knit group of people. You see the same folks all the time. And it was funny. A friend of ours came with her family to watch one of the races, and I wasn't racing. Kevin was racing, and I was, you stand at one spot on the track, and the whole weekend they were there. She's like, this is just like being at a horse show. It's like, hurry up and get dressed. And then you sit in your car and you wait on the grid till you can go out. And then we're waiting. I'm like waiting for Kevin to come around because which cars are in front of him. And I'm waiting. And she's like, it's like waiting at the finish line for riders to come across from cross country. You got to see if they finished. So there's a lot of similarities, but I think the racing driving is similar to dressage in some ways. You're doing it at 100 miles an hour. But it's how can you make that corner just a little bit tighter, a little bit cleaner? How can you make that smoother? It's that those incremental changes that you can make in how you're driving. And it's a mix of relaxation and tension that you have to manage. That's the same as dressage. So I think for me, it's mental, and it's all very mentally all consuming. Like you have to be thinking about what you're doing. I always said that riding is my practice of mindfulness because it centers me. I'm thinking just about what I'm doing. And if I'm not, I get off because that's not a good way to be. Driving is the same way. So I've had a really good time. It's been 2 years I've raced, and we've raced at a couple of different tracks on the East Coast, and it's been really fun.
That is the coolest thing ever. Wow. You just continue to get more and more interesting. It's wild.
I am not the most interesting woman in the world, I promise. I am a very normal person.
Up there. You're giving whoever it is, you're giving her a run for her money. So Heather, I don't mean to go from car racing to like a very seeming, I don't know, less intense question, but do you have any life hacks for kind of how you manage your time or how you just like keep everything in order? I'm sure there's just a lot of like scheduling and making sure nothing gets missed in managing everything that you're managing.
Things get missed all the time, and just know that that's going to happen. I have stuff that works for me. I have to physically write things down. So I keep things on paper. I have, there are electronic records of everything, but you can't see it, but in my office, I have a giant Kanban board that I use Post-it notes on. That's what I use for work. For the horses, honestly, a lot of that lives in my head. And if I get hit by a bus, someone's going to have to figure out what happened with that. But a lot of it is, Kevin works a really weird schedule. He works 24 hour on, 24 hour off schedule. So there's lots of coordinating that goes on between my schedule and his schedule, and when do we need a farm sitter and who's going to be home when. And honestly, this is going to sound like the dumbest life hack ever because it's not really that fancy. We get meal kits delivered. So we did like Sunbasket for a while. We do Purple Chef now. Purple Carrot is what it's called. Where like at least during the week we don't have to think about what we're going to cook. There's a meal, and it has directions and cook this, and it's how we eat healthy, decent food without ordering takeout all the time. Which frankly, we're going to go out for dinner tonight. But that's been a huge time saver for us. The other thing is I gave up several years ago on cleaning my house. I have a cleaning lady who comes in twice a month. And that's been worth every penny that I spend on it because she does a better job than me. And it's 4 hours of my week that I get back that I don't have to spend time on. So those are two dumb things, but they really are actually pretty life-changing for me.
I love this advice. Like, it seems like you have a good mix of giving yourself grace and also holding yourself to, what you want to achieve and to being good at what you're doing. Someone in chat, I think it might be Lauren, but tell me if it wasn't, said Nora Roberts once said the key to juggling was to know which balls are rubber and which are glass. And I think that's amazing. And like that helps that helps a person give themselves grace as well.
That was Catherine, by the way. Catherine in chat. I also have to note, Heather, that my Purple Carrot box is on the counter directly next to me. So very much a fan of Purple Carrot. And Jessa has a Kanban whiteboard directly next to her. So these are things that we co-sign on these as well. So that's great.
resonating. The purple carrot thing I did for a long time, but I'm literally lazier than even that. That was, whatever. I know myself, and now I'm getting Trader Joe's meals that I can just put right in the pan. So
bag salads, honestly, like one of my Waterloos is like eating lunch at home by myself. Like I would eat chips and salsa, which really is not the best lunch. So bagged salads from the grocery store, like the complete salad mixes, that's been great. Anything I do to eat a little healthier, and because you knowing which balls are rubber and which ones are glass is important, but that's going to be different for everybody. For me, my health is really important. I've had back issues my whole life. If I don't stay in shape, it's going to be really, really bad for me. So like, I have to watch what I eat. I have to exercise. I mentioned some Peloton stuff today. That's been life-changing for me because I can't run anymore. I used to run half marathons, and that was motivating for me. But like, I have to do those things. So that is a glass ball for me. I can't drop that one. But things I can drop is like landscaping on my farm. I can drop some other things, shopping for clothes.
Yes, totally. Having clarity around that on an individual level is so great. I saw the running medals behind you, and I was curious, are those, I'm guessing those are yours now that you said that.
Yeah.
Does your husband run as well?
No.
There's a lot of medals.
No. Yeah, it's a few. I've done, I don't know, 6 or 7 half marathons. It was great while I was doing it. I took up running in my 30s. So like, it's not like I was a runner as a kid. I was very slow. I think my best half time was like 2:15, and that I don't even know how I did that. But I've had, like I said, I've had back issues my whole life. I had knee surgery a couple of years ago for a thing related to my back, not even running related. And when I went back to running after that, my back was like, the knee was your last warning. Like, I'm really going to crap out on you if you don't take care of me better and stop running. So I listened, because, you need your back to ride. And if it was a choice between running or riding, riding's going to win out every time.
Totally. It's interesting you say you need your back to ride. You also need it to walk, but it's good that you will be able to continue riding, and the bike is helpful for that. Somebody in chat also just said girl lunch, which I was thinking the same thing when you said chips and salsa. I don't know if you guys have all heard, like, girl lunch and girl dinner is what we would all eat if we just like are alone and want to have a night and just have cheese and crackers or chips and salsa. So that's relatable too.
I had girl dinner the other night. I totally did. I actually went to the nice cheese shop in town, and I got some cheese and I got some nice bread. It's good.
It's so good. I'm curious. You mentioned at the very beginning of our chat that like you aren't someone who just has like loads and loads of dispensable income to make this all work. And it reminded me of a chat happening in the Chronicle of the Horse forum that was so interesting. It was talking about what makes riding fulfilling. And so many of the comments were like, believe it or not, after all these years, I've come to learn that like, it's not money. Money is not the key to happiness in these sports. So when you think about where you invest your money in what you're doing, what are the buckets that are like, this is not worth overspending on or even spending it all on? And this is where it sounds like coaching is an important one to invest in. But like, how do you think about where you put that?
Where am I going to get the most bang for my buck? Coaching, obviously, you're not going to get better if you're not listening to other people. I mean, the best riders in the world ride with coaches. There's no top rider out there that doesn't have their person. So, coaching is obviously near the top of that list. The other one, especially as we've got up the levels, is veterinary care. I am incredibly lucky to be where I am in Virginia. I have access to some of the best vet care in the country. And boy, do I make use of it. And it makes a really big difference. It keeps my horses healthy longer. It helps us identify problems earlier and nip them in the bud before they become actual problems. So, I spend a fair amount of money on pretty expensive veterinary care every year, but I credit that with getting us to, that and good coaching to getting us where we are. Everything else, it's like, do I have money for that really pretty new sun shirt that I want? Probably not, but I might buy it anyway. But I also like, I'm still wearing breeches that I had 10 years ago. Like I don't buy new breeches all the time. I buy quality tack. I buy the best tack I could possibly afford, but I take care of it meticulously so I don't have to replace it. So that's my mentality with a lot of horse stuff, is like, I'll buy the best thing I possibly can and then really take care of it because I can't afford to replace it. So, for me, that's where I'm spending my money, is on the quality things. And I don't spend money on, like I said, I don't spend money on a fancy barn. I don't spend money on making my place look really, really pretty all the time. It's safe, it's functional, that keeps the rain out. We fix things as they need to be fixed, but it's, what do we actually have to make things functional? And then the other thing is, I'll spend money on things that make my life a little bit easier. We bought a manure spreader this year, which, God, I don't know why I didn't do that sooner. But that's been really helpful. It saves me time. So, coaching in veterinary, the best quality kind of supplies that you can get that are going to last a long time. And then what can you do? What can you spend money on to make your life, to save you time? And, it goes back to, I have a cleaning lady. I never thought I'd be that person, but here I am, because it saves me time. And that's important. That gives me time to do other stuff.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That is, that's really helpful. Really helpful advice. Heather, we are here on the top of the hour almost. Is there anything related to you, kind of this topic of balancing career and life and horses, that you feel like we haven't covered, or advice that you've been given along the way that has really helped you? I just want to make sure that we've kind of hit on all the main points that you think we should have.
Yeah, I don't know that there's anything else. I guess the only thing that I'd say is, like, if you're doing this, you're spending a lot of money doing it, and make sure that you're doing it because you love it, and your goals don't have to be the same as everybody else's goals. If you want to do it with a half Arabian, half Frisian, do it, man. Like, no one's going to stop you, and don't let anybody tell you that you shouldn't. And if they're telling you shouldn't, then find new friends. They're out there. So some of it is a little bit finding your tribe and figuring out who those people are, but do what's going to make you happy. Because we spend too much time and money, and we risk too much riding horses to really not enjoy it. So figure out how to make it fun and follow that path. And when it stops being fun, do something else. Like I always say, when I'm done riding dressage, I'm taking up endurance riding. Like that's my next hobby, is endurance riding. I want to try that sometime.
That's amazing. Look out, world, because I know that you will be great at that. It does sound really fun. We have some members who are endurance riders and a coach who's an endurance rider. This has been such a treat, Heather. I really look up to you, and I know that that's probably hard for you to internalize, but I do. I think that you're a very cool person. So thank you for spending the hour with us. I have voiced before that I want to be best friends with Lauren. Now I know I want to be best friends with Lauren and Heather. So that'll be my goal to work towards. Maybe we could, maybe I'll make my goal more realistic, and it'll be like one day I get to have a glass of wine with you too. But I really appreciate everything that you shared and how candidly you shared your experience with us today, because it helped me, and I'm not riding these days. So there's a lot to be gleaned from the advice that you just shared. And I know especially the people who are listening who are adult amateurs and riding every day will appreciate it. So we really appreciate you, and thanks for doing it.
Sure. Happy to be here. It's good to talk to you guys, and, happy to talk to folks offline. I'm on Instagram at eponakelt. I post random stuff about being on the farm, and sometimes it's about how much I hate my day and how it's cold and why can't I go to Florida this year. But mostly it's just cute dog and horse pictures.
That's amazing. What did you say your handle is?
Eponakelt, EPONACELT.
All right. That's what I'm doing next, following you. All right, Heather, we'll have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much. And